Now that Belisarius has had some time to sit in the meta and Eleanor has been fully released into the game, I think it's time I update the new best Cavalry Murderball, building you from maybe just one cav march all the way up to 7 cavalry marches if you are crazy. So if you want to know the new best Cavalry Murderballs, if you're a cavalry main, maybe you just want to choose 1 or 2 cav marches, maybe you even want 3 cav marches, and then you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's just start off by diving right into your first cav march, and I think it comes as no surprise to most people that it's going to be a Nevsky Joan. Belisarius isn't a new game-breaking meta commander, he isn't the biggest meta shifter in the world, so Nevsky Joan is still your first march. It's still arguably the best cav march. You've got a very stat-heavy Nevsky with a pretty decent debuff, and then you've got a very damage-high Joan with a few supporting things on her active skill as well, and this is just an extremely great AoE march with a very, very solid primary commander, and it's just going to be very powerful. So this is easily your first march. They're both obtainable in the Wheel of Fortune. Really easy to get. If you need a cav march, you get Nevsky Joan, and you're pretty much set for no matter what you are. Even if you're a mixed player, if you're just a cav player, if you want to have mainly cav marches and then some other marches mixed in, Nevsky with Joan is a pretty much must-have, and it is your first march. Moving on to 2 marches, you're sticking with the Nevsky and the Joan, and now we're going to pick up a Hao Che Bing, and we're going to put him with a William over a Belisarius for 2 marches. You can put Belisarius here if you plan on running other troop types, so if you're only making 2 cav marches, which is what I recommend for most free-to-play low spenders, then you can certainly put in a William. If you're running maybe another infantry and maybe 2 archer marches, then you've got 5 marches, and Belisarius' expertise is actually worth it. So if you're running more than just these 2 cav marches alone, Hao Che Bing with a Belisarius is better than a Hao Che Bing with a William. That being said, if you are running the exact Murderball I just said, a Nevsky Joan with a Hao Che Bing William, William is better because William's supporting factor, giving you more rage, doesn't really get reduced if there's no one around him. So really, if you're not using 5 marches, while you're not getting full value out of William's skill, you're not losing any value. But with Belisarius, if you're not using 5 marches, you're losing a lot of value on that all damage reduction. It's half the strength, and at 2 marches only, which is what you would technically be at right now, you won't even receive anything from Belisarius' expertise. So this skill is useless to you until you've got at least 3 marches. So that's why Hao Che Bing with William, it's better for the first 2 or 3 marches, and that's why I prefer to pick it up before I would pick up a Belisarius, unless you are looking to run more other marches, such as an infantry or an archer march. That being said, this is also a solid march. Hao Che Bing really fast rage cycle, which is great with William because he's going to boost your other march, your Nevsky and your Joan, by giving them more rage, or it's going to at least boost your other allies. So this is a good march. There's decent AoE on William, not meta, pretty bad shape, but it is an AoE nonetheless. And Hao Che Bing is just a fairly high damage, fairly speedy cav commander with all around really decent stats. So this is just a very solid cav Murderball. 2 marches of a Hao Che Bing William and a Nevsky Joan, with a possibility of Belisarius if you're running up to 5 marches with other troop types included. Now moving on to 3 marches, this is where you really start to lose a bit of value with your cav Murderball, but this is still possible for a free-to-play low spender. I wouldn't put it like a definitely don't do it, but I wouldn't really encourage 3 cav marches. I don't really encourage 3 marches for any troop type. You should really only go to 2. When if you wanted to do 3, and I do 3 archer marches personally, 3 marches does still work because these commanders are still fairly meta and fairly strong, just some of them are a bit outdated. That means though, for 3 marches, we're going to pick up both Zhang Yu and we're going to pick up Belisarius, and we're going to mix and match the Murderball a little bit. First of all, you're keeping the Nevsky and the Joan, that's just going to stay as a march up until your 7th march. But then we're going to mix up who Hao Che Bing is with. I am going to put Hao Che Bing with William, just because when we look at William as just a general commander, it's better to have the faster rage cycle on William than it is to have it on Belisarius. While Belisarius does basically have a silence on his active skill, the main thing you care about is the supporting expertise here, and it doesn't matter about his rage. This is an instant debuff, it'll instantly go on your opponents, which is why he can still work with a Zhang Yu, who arguably has the same rage cycle. On top of that, you're able to split up your AoE, so your Hao Bing will have your William with AoE, and then Zhang Yu and Belisarius will have one AoE. So instead of putting a Zhang Yu William and putting both your AoEs on one march, you're splitting them, so if one march does go down, you still have AoE on the other. So that really means though you're going to go with the Hao Bing and the Belisarius. At this point, you've got the 3 marches, you're at least getting some value out of that expertise right there, and you maybe have some other troop marches in there, like an infantry and archer. And then you've also picked up Zhang Yu at this point, and he's going to give you fairly decent damage on the active skill right there, and then just some pretty decent damaging stats. So this is a very solid 3-march Murderball. You'll have the Hao Bing with the William, giving you a lot of rage buffing as well, and a few debuffs on the opponent. You'll have Nevsky Joan as your strongest cav march, and you'll have a Zhang Yu with a Belisarius as a very good supporting march as well, with an AoE and a very powerful debuff. Now moving towards 4 cav marches, this is where you really do start to lose a lot of value for your Murderball. This is the point where I say free-to-play shouldn't go here. I never ever would recommend a free-to-play get 4 marches of one troop type, because there are just much better commanders for the other troop types, and that means if you go 4 of one troop type, and you want to run 1 archer and 1 infantry, you need 6 marchers, you need crystal tech, and it gets really messy. So if you're going to run 4 cav marches, it's a whale only situation, and you'll see after this point, none of the commanders are really heavily meta. Justinian would be like the last fairly decent commander that we'll be talking about, because the rest after this are really outdated, or they just aren't the best on the open field. That being said though, for 4 marches, you've got a little bit of freedom with what you do here, and there's really 3 options I'd recommend. The personal thing I would be doing is I'd be running a Justinian with a Minamoto as a secondary. This is just a solid march, really okay single target damage. Justinian, he's kinda tanky, he's got some tanky stuff like cav defense, he's also got a health bonus as well, so he can do pretty alright on the open field, and also if he's doing surrounding, like whenever your opponent is surrounded, he's just going to be dealing extra damage. And at this point with 4 marches, it kind of works out. So I think Justinian's not the worst pickup at this point. And with Minamoto, you're just going to get a really solid amount of single target damage. You're getting a very nice passive debuff, and you're getting to get just a lot of stats out of him, especially with that museum relic. So Minamoto with a Justinian, it's a very solid option you can go for, especially if you've got the double relic Mina, and also it's going to save you a lot of gold heads, since you can literally just buy Minamoto outside of the VIP shop if you're willing to spend that money. That being said though, there is another option that you should consider, especially if you don't have a Scipio Africanus in your Murderball, because he's got a health debuff. You can consider running a Justinian with a Chandragupta, and that's because Chandragupta gives a really nice health debuff, which is a health and defense, and it's going to stack up to 3 times. You'll get a 15% health reduction on the opponent in a passive skill slot, so other CPO debuffs will stack, and that's why Chandragupta is a really good supporting commander, and he is a good option if you don't have a CPO in your Murderball. The third and final option I will give you is if you want to just run a slightly more powerful commander than Minamoto, you can pick up Honda Tadakatsu, and it's going to be slightly better, but in my opinion, for the gold head cost, it's just not worth it at this point, and I would rather save my gold heads and just use the Mina, who's maybe like 5 or 10% worse than Honda. So that means for 4 marches, as a cavalry main, you're going to be running the Nevsky and the Joan, you're going to be running a Hao Bing with a William, a Zhang Yu with a Belisarius, and then a Justinian with either a Minamoto, Chandragupta, or a Honda Tadakatsu. Moving on to 5 marches now, this is where we're going to pick up Attila and Takeda, and this could have been your 4th march if you did want it as that, and it wouldn't have been too crazy, but in my opinion, 5 marches for Attila Takeda is probably more reasonable, especially since these are 2 commanders you have to get instead of just 1 before if you did choose the Mina like I recommended. That being said though, especially at 5 marches at this point, you're a whale. You're not going to do 5 of cav marches if you're not a whale, and that's why I think Attila Takeda is good for whales, and that's why he's later on the list. He could have been earlier. I think he could arguably be the 4th, and then you could have the Justinian Mina after, and that's not too crazy. But Attila Takeda is just a all-round fairly stat-heavy just march. It's really tanky, it's really anti-swarm, and you're just dealing a ton of normal damage. So if you want to run an Attila Takeda, it's not the worst at this point in the meta, especially now that they both have their own relics. but it is definitely a bit more expensive to set up. You need to get both Attila and Takeda's relic. You need a double expertise, 2 new commanders. One of them, Attila, is slightly harder to get because he is meant to be an MGE commander. All of this stuff can get pretty annoying whenever you're looking to run an Attila Takeda march, and if you're a free-to-play or a low spender, like I said, I wouldn't be doing 5 marches, but definitely consider that with Attila and Takeda, you need very, very high crystal tech to really get a lot of value out of them, or you need really good equipment to get the really good anti-swarm value. Otherwise, they're just going to get melted and then they lose their main advantage, which is that anti-swarm. So that means if you're looking at 5 marches, you're going to run Attila and Takeda, you're going to run Nevsky, and you're going to run Joan, you're going to run Hao Bing with William, Zhang Yu with Belisarius, and finally the Justinian with whichever commander you chose before. Now moving on to 6 marches, we're once again going to be rearranging the Murderball. First of all, the first 3 marches will stay the same, so Nevsky Joan, Zhang Yu with Belisarius, and Hao Bing with William. Those 3 marches will not change. But the Justinian march especially is going to get a little bit of a mix around depending on which commanders you picked. If you ran a Chandragupta with your Justinian, or if you ran a Honda with him, you're going to want to move him to a Bertrand. At this point, we have to pick up Bertrand. He's okay on the field. I mean, like, barely passable. Like I said, we're looking at 6 marches of pure calves at this point. You're kind of scratching at the air to try and get something, but Bertrand's not too bad on the field, and you can definitely get away with him. So Bertrand, and you're going to put him with either that Chandragupta, or you're going to put him with the Honda, if you have a CPO in your Murderball. So Bertrand with either Chandragupta or a Honda is your 6th march. And then your Justinian has to be with a Minamoto at this point. It's just not even questionable. There really is no other option than running this march. I mean, you could run Saladin or Mehmed, but I think that Minamoto is a little bit better in this current meta. And that means for 6 marches, your 2 marches you're going to really change. Justinian has to be with Minamoto, and also your friend Bertrand is going to be with Chandragupta, or it's going to be with a Honda Tadakatsu. Now moving to 7 marches, this is where we get really desperate for any commander that's pretty good, because we've knocked off pretty much everyone but Eleanor, Cao Cao, Genghis Khan, Saladin, Jadwiga, and also Yanziska. 3 of those commanders unusable. I would say Yanziska, Jadwiga, and also Cao Cao. They're fairly unusable. You've really got Khan, Saladin, and Eleanor. And out of those 3 commanders, Eleanor, she's the newest, she's just got more damage and more stats, it just really comes down to that, and Saladin has always been a mid-open field commander, at least over the last year or so, so that means Saladin with Eleanor is kind of the march you have to run here, and I'd probably run the Saladin as the primary just because he's got the support conquering tree, while Eleanor has the garrison defense tree. So this is going to be a horrible march, don't get me wrong, it's going to absolutely suck, but you really don't have any other option if you're moving towards 7 marches. There is a little bit of a mixing around you can do at this point though. If you did a Bertrand with a Honda, then you can do a Chandragupta with an Eleanor, and that's not too crazy, or a Chandragupta with a Saladin, but that is really only if you have a Honda with your Bertrand. So for 7 marches, your main Murderball is going to be a Nevsky with a Joan, it's going to be a Hao Bing with a William, a Zhang Yu with a Belisarius, a Justinian with a Minamoto, a Bertrand with either a Honda or a Chandragupta, a Attila and a Takeda, and finally you're going to have an Eleanor with a Chandragupta or a Saladin, depending on if you have a Honda with your Bertrand or not. But even if you don't have Honda, the Murderball's still going to pretty much perform the same, and this 7th march will definitely be your weakest and your worst march by far. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I'm going to ask you guys for a small favor, and that is consider telling me what you thought of my basically choices in the comments below. Do you think that me choosing some of the marches was a bad idea? Do you think my 7th march could have actually been stronger? Let me know in the comments down below. I like to read every comment. They also do help the video get a few more views. So whenever you guys leave a comment, even just a thank you or an I hate you, I do really appreciate reading them, except the I hate you one. So do consider leaving a comment down below. I read every single one within like 1 or 2 days. I'll give you a response and I'll usually give you guys a heart. So leave a comment down below. I'm always interested to see what you guys think. And also they do help shape these videos, since I'm always open to change my opinion. Now I just want to say I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you in the next one. Crap, I missed out on these gold. Wow, I missed out on a lot of gold chests. I should have logged in this morning.